Hey guys, tonight we trudge through dawn-lit olive groves until sunlight filters through leaves, glinting off ripening fruit like scattered rubies. And if you snag a pomegranate without Demeter's blessing, you probably won't survive her wrath, so mind your harvest. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time below, so we can sip together in real time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step over gnarled roots heavy with dew, the air fragrant with olive oil and honeyed earth. Ahead, a hidden alcove reveals rows of pomegranate trees, their branches bowing under ruby-red globes that glow against a slate sky. Apollo's presence stirs as you trudge beside him, his golden cloak drifting like sunbeams between trunks. A mainstream historical fact in ancient Greece. Pomegranates symbolized fertility and were sacred to Demeter and Persephone, often used in harvest festivals to celebrate Earth's bounty. Historians still argue whether pomegranate worship began in Minoan palaces or later spread through classical temples. You crouch beside a low branch tracing a leathery rind, stained with dew. Apollo kneels too, his lyre slung across his back, its ivory strings catching the first light. You reach for a fruit, twisting gently. It parts with a soft pop, revealing clusters of seeds glistening like tiny hearts. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some Orphic poets claimed Dionysus secretly planted these groves after a midnight feast, blessing each seed with ecstatic visions. Historians still debate whether any Dionysian orchard rituals existed or linger as poetic metaphor. You press a seed to your lips, its tart sweet burst, flooding your tongue, and quip softly, "If every snack exploded with this gusto, I'd ditch granola bars." That's your first gentle jest. Apollo hums a soft melody as you fill your basket, each note weaving through branches like a breeze. A mainstream fact, musical accompaniment accompanied many Greek agricultural rites, blending art with labor to honor the gods. Historians still argue whether music held ritual potency or simply lifted spirits. You grin at Apollo's tune, thinking, if my morning routine featured live concertos, I'd wake without an alarm. That's your second light jest. Together you wander deeper where bees hum among blooms of wild thyme tangled at roots. Their wings glint amber as they ferry nectar back to hidden hives. Apollo waves a hand and you kneel to light a small bundle of dried herbs, thyme and oregano for gentle smoke beneath the hive's entrance. The bees quiet, drifting inside as you fan smoky tendrils skyward. A fringe whisper drifts. Some local beekeepers swore these bees once forged honey laced with pomegranate juice, yielding combs as red as wine. Historians still debate whether any naturally fermented honeycombs existed or belong purely to legend. You inhale thyme-scented smoke and quip, "If smoke cleared my spam folder, I'd burn my inbox weekly." That's your third gentle jest. The basket brims with fruit as Apollo leads you to a sunlit clearing where a bronze cauldron perches on marble supports, carved with laurel wreaths. You set down the pomegranates and scoop thyme-smoked honey from a carved jarret's surface, gleaming in early light. You drizzle honey into the cauldron, each ribbon catching sunlight like liquid gold. A mainstream fact, honey was prized in classical Greek cooking and medicine for sweetness and preservative qualities. Historians still argue whether apothecaries or temple kitchens first refined its uses. You stir honey and juice, whispering, "If sweetness solved my to-do list, I'd sweet-talk every task." That's your fourth light jest. Steam rises in gentle swirls as pomegranate juice melts with honey, and you feel the grove's hush deepen. A sacred threshold, where myth becomes ritual. You and Apollo exchange a quiet smile, knowing this sacred brew weaves Earth's gifts into divine nectar. A callback surfaces from the grove's hidden fruit to the smoky hive, to the simmering cauldron. Each step threads ancient myth into a living ceremony. You trudge uphill along a narrow goat track, inhaling the mingled scents of wild thyme and mountain breeze, as Apollo leads you toward the sun-scorched slopes of Mount Hymettus. Renowned in antiquity for yielding the finest honey in all Attica, the hillside bristles with hardy shrubs, thyme, oregano, and sage, their flowers nodding under noon's heat. A mainstream historical fact, ancient Athenians prized Mount Hymettus honey for its distinctive herbal notes, often offering it at Panathenaic festivals. Historians still argue whether apiaries there were managed communally or by specialized beekeeping families. Ahead, you glimpse woven skeps wicker hives, perched atop stone plinths to protect from bears and wolves. Apollo pauses, plucking off a sprig of thyme, crushing its tiny blossoms between thumb and forefinger. You catch the thyme's sharp, woodsy aroma, anticipating how it will infuse the honey's sweetness. A fringe tidbit floats. Some rustic poets swore Mount Hymettus bees built nests woven with stray laurel leaves to honor Apollo. Historians still debate whether such laurel-lined hives ever existed or remain a later embellishment. You smile, picturing bees sleeping among wreaths, and quip, if my bed was scented like this, I'd climb into my sheets at dawn. That's your first gentle jest. As you approach the nearest skeps, a low hum grows into a golden chorus. You crouch beside Apollo, noting each skep's dome-like weave spaces just wide enough for worker bees to buzz through. He lights a small torch of dried rosemary and holds it beneath the hive's entrance, sending pale smoke drifting inside. Worker bees somersault into the hive, calm and orderly, retreating deeper into the shimmering honeycomb. A mainstream fact, smoke was used by ancient beekeepers to mimic forest fire and prompt bees to gorge on honey, reducing their defensiveness. Historians still argue whether Greek smoke mixtures included particular herbs for better effect or use whatever was at hand. You inhale the rosemary smoke's sweet bite, thinking, if smoke cleared my mind this well, I'd bait my to-do list. That's your second light jest. You help Apollo pry off the skep's light tangle of wicker and wax and remove the first honey-laden frame. Thick globs of honey pout like liquid amber from comb cells. You dip a finger to taste honey's sweetness mingles with thyme's warm bite and oregano's subtle earthiness. A fringe anecdote drifts. Some local elders claimed bees feasted on pomegranate blossoms at dawn, blending fruit's tang into their honey. Historians still debate whether pomegranate pollen ever flavored Mount Hymettus honey, or if the tale arose from the later tea tradition. You savor the flavor fusion, quip, if all my snacks pack this complexity, I'd never risk plain granola. That's your third gentle jest. Basket half full, you and Apollo move to the next step, repeating smoke and lid removal with practiced ease. Each frame yields honey glistening in the hexagonal pattern, nature's perfect geometry. You brush wax shards aside, gathering comb fragments, known as honey kisses, for immediate nibbling. A mainstream fact, honeycomb fragments were prized treats in ancient Greece, eaten directly or used in desserts. Historians still debate whether combs featured in temple offerings or remained private luxuries. You pop a piece into your mouth, chewing, slowly feeling wax give way to cascades of honey and muse. If my rewards tasted this good, I'd finish every chore. That's your fourth light jest. As the sun arcs toward the afternoon, the hillside's warmth intensifies. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and watch bees swirl in lazy columns above thyme blooms. Apollo crouches to collect stray bees, with a gentle scoop of weaker, transferring them back into the skep, never a sting, only patient motion. A fringe suggestion arises. Some sagas hint that Apollo sang soft melodies to guide bees home, his voice unlocking hives' secret doors. Historians still debate whether any singing rituals accompanied Greek beekeeping or lie within poetic fancy. You lean close, humming a few notes, yourself chuckling. If my singing guided anyone home, I'd audition for every GPS. That's your fifth gentle jest. By late afternoon, your basket bills with honeycomb and jars ready for the cauldron. You stand atop a rocky ledge, overlooking Athens below, the city's white marble rooftops glowing, the heat's scent and honey's promise to swell in your chest as you inhale deeply. A callback surfaces. Remember pomegranate's ruby seeds and grove's hush. Now they fuse with thyme-sweet honey harvested from Hymettus's heights, threads woven into Apollo's sacred tea. You smile at Apollo's satisfied nod. Then quip, if my achievements smelled this sweet, I'd bottle my resume. Slowly, you trudge back downhill jars, clinking in your pack bee's hum fading behind you. The mountain's wild chorus bee breeze. Time lingers in the memory as you prepare your precious harvest for blending into the divine brew. You trudge through olive groves, a basket of thyme-kissed honey slung over your shoulder until the path narrows to flagstones worn by centuries of pilgrim feet. Ahead, a veil of moss-clad columns heralds the Castalian springets, a stone basin fed by underground mountain waters that ripple with crystalline clarity. A mainstream historical fact, Delphi's Castalian spring supplied water for purifications before consulting the oracle believed to flow directly from Mount Parnassus's sacred aquifer. Historians still argue whether spring water held genuinely different mineral properties or its purity found fame mainly through mythic reputation. The air is cool and damp, scented with wet stone and the faint tang of ancient incense residue. Apollo steps forward, lifting a carved bronze ladle, its handle draped with laurel leaves still damp from overnight dew. You crouch beside him, pressing your palm against the spring's edgewater, so clear it seems to vanish beneath your skin. A fringe tidbit whispers some priests claim that fish in the sacred pool glowed faintly under moonlight after sipping Castalian waters, a sign of divine blessing. Historians still debate whether any such luminescent fish existed or if the story emerged from poetic license. You dip your fingertips into the flow, feeling the cool current slip between bones and veins and quip, if my morning routine felt this refreshing, I'd never hit snooze. That's your first gentle jest. Apollo fills a small clay amphora with slow, patient pours. He tilts the vessel just so, ensuring not a single droplet splashes onto cracked marble tiles. A mainstream fact, ancient pilgrims carried amphorae sealed with resin or beeswax to preserve spring water's freshness for ritual use. Historians still argue whether amphora size varied by social rank or functioned more for practical convenience. You retrieve your own amphora, a modest ceramic jug inscribed with Delphi's omphalos symbol, and watch water swirl inside like liquid light. You smile at the water's calm surface, thinking, if my thoughts stayed this still, I'd meditate all day. That's your second light jest. Nearby, a novice priest unlaces his sandals and wades into a shallow ledge of the spring, stirring water around his ankles in a silent ablution. Each movement ripples outward, distorting patterns in the stone basin. A fringe notion surfaces. Oracular texts hint that priests recited whispered prayers beneath the water surface, believing the spring amplified secret petitions. Historians still debate whether any submerged incantations occurred or if they remain intriguing footnotes in later writings. You watch ripples fade and quip. If my worries dissolve this quickly, I'd drop them in every fountain. That's your third gentle jest. The marble rim is cool against your fingers as you rinse your amphora's interior, careful to cleanse any residue. Apollo stands holding his jug, now brimming with sacred water, and tips his head skyward, letting sunbeams dance upon the liquid surface. He breathes in deeply, and you follow suit, water's crisp clarity flooding your lungs. A mainstream fact, Greek ritual water often carried symbolic fresh start energy used to wash altar stools and hands before sacred ceremonies. Historians still argue whether any formal prayers accompanied every pour, or if practice varied by cult. You quench your thirst with a small sip, savoring water's pure taste. Then quip, if hydration tasted this poetic, I'd drink 5 gallons daily. That's your fourth light jest. Apollo takes a handful of lotus petals, pale pink blossoms, plucked from a bowlan, lets them float atop your amphora's brim. Their silk petals, skimming the water like miniature boats. You taste the petals' dew-wet edge, floral and faintly sweet, imagining how it will steep into the tea later. A fringe anecdote drifts. Some Delphic healers believed lotus-infused water cured insomnia better than warm milk. Historians still debate whether lotus held actual sedative properties or if its use stayed symbolic and aesthetic. You let a petal drift away, quip, if petals calmed my thoughts, this well I'd bathe in petals nightly. That's your fifth gentle jest. With amphorae filled and lotus petals adrift, you and Apollo turn from the spring's marble embrace. A gentle hum of cicadas rises as you ascend, stairways carved into living rock, amphora strains secure against your hip. The grove's scent lingers. Wet stone, thyme honey's promise intertwining in your senses. A callback emerges, remember the orchard's ruby seeds. Now water's pure clarity will marry honey's golden richness in the cauldron, threading life's essences into divine brew. At the spring's mouth, priests lay freshly washed reeds in a stone trough to catch any drips, recycling water into small cups for pilgrims. You pause to drop a coin into a shallow basin, offering echoing countless hopes, then step away into sunlit air. A mainstream historical fact, votive offerings at sacred springs ranged from coins to oil lamps, symbolizing gratitude and petitions. Historians still argue whether spring deposits served community treasure or were regularly cleared by temple caretakers. You trudge down stone steps, amphora snug and brimming, carrying Castalian Spring's sacred essence back to the grove and cauldron. Each step resonates with centuries of pilgrim feet, from wandering poet to supplicant, queen linking you across time. You quip softly, if every journey tasted this pure, I'd wander forever. And as you rejoin Apollo beneath olive branches, you sense how spring water, honey and pomegranate seeds await alchemy in your next blending rite. You trudge through olive-shaded groves back to the sunlit clearing, where a bronze cauldron sits perched on marble pillars, its surface catching midday rays like a liquid mirror. Apollo sets down 2 amphorae, one brimming with Castalian spring water, the other heavy with thyme-scented Hymettus honey. You kneel beside him on sun-warmed stone, the air fragrant with earth thyme and lingering lotus petals. A mainstream historical fact, in ancient Greek cooking and medicine, blending fruit juices with honey and water was common. Diluted honey, hydromel, predated grape-based wines in some regions. Historians still argue whether hydros was primarily a daily table drink or reserved for rituals. Apollo pours a steady stream of pomegranate juice into the cauldron, each ruby droplet splashing with crisp pinks against metal. The juice glistens, pooling into an opulent pool of color, and you reach in to swirl it gently with your fingers before pulling back beads of red gliding between your skin. Fringe tidbit surfaces. Some classical authors alleged that early Dionysian followers infused pomegranate juice with goat's milk in secret rites, creating a wine of the underworld drunk only at night. Historians still debate whether any such dairy blends truly existed or thrived as a mythic legend. You flick juice from finger to tongue, savoring its tart sweetness and quip, "If my morning smoothie tasted this bold, I'd skip the protein powder." That's your first gentle jest. Next, Apollo retrieves a carved wooden ladle and scoops glorious honey from your amphora, letting it cascade in slow ribbons into the crimson depth. Honey strings catch the light, each filament stretching out before snapping back into the mix. A mainstream fact: ancient Greeks measured honey by volume rather than weight, often using standardized ladles or cups to ensure drinkable consistency. Historians still argue whether these measures corresponded precisely between regions or varied by household tradition. You lean in, inhaling honey's warm floral aroma and muse, "If my schedule flowed this smoothly, I'd never call meetings." That's your second light jest. As honey and juice swirl together, you dip the ladle and lift a scoop of the thick blend, tasting its sweet tart harmony. Pomegranate's bright pop tempered by honey's mellow warmth, each sip awakening your senses. A fringe suggestion drifts: local healers once added a pinch of ground silphium, now extinct plant prized for flavor and medicine, to similar blends, claiming it eased heartache. Historians still debate whether silphium's rarity limited its use to elite tables or seeded countless legends of its potency. You savor the nuanced thinking: "If a lost plant fixed my heartbreak, I'd sell tickets to my breakup recovery." That's your third gentle jest. You help Apollo stir the mixture, tracing broad circles clockwise. An act believed to honor the sun's path and infuse the brew with divine light. Each lap sends gentle waves across honey and juice, merging into a single glowing amber-red liquid. A mainstream historical fact: directional stirring in Greek culinary lore mirrored ritual movements in temple rites. Historians still argue whether stirring direction held true ritual efficacy or simply mirrored symbolic sun worship. You dip a fingertip into the cauldron's edge, tasting a swirl of color and quip, "If stirring fixed my writer's block, I'd wave a spoon daily." That's your fourth light jest. Nearby, a low wooden table holds bowls of crushed herbs, mint bog myrtle, and dried lotus petals. Apollo sprinkles a small pinch of mint into the cauldron, releasing a cascade of green flecks that drift like confetti. A fringe anecdote surfaces: certain temple records note that mint infusions soothed oracular voices, preventing prophetic babble. Historians still debate whether mint's role in temple brew served therapeutic aims or became later dramatic lore. You sniff the swirl of mint's cool tang against the honeyed sweetness and quip, "If mint calmed my nerves, this well I'd carry sprigs to every exam." That's your fifth gentle jest. With the base now sweet tart and herbal, Apollo ladles a small portion into a slender bronze ewer and carries it to a low table draped in laurel garlands. You follow, noticing how strands of tea catch the ewer's lip as he pours into waiting cups, copper, clay, and silver, each vessel etched with lyre or pomegranate motifs. A mainstream fact: ancient Greeks used a variety of vessels for ritual drinks: craters, kylixes, and ewerseek, chosen for specific ceremonies. Historians still argue whether each vessel type conferred different ritual status or merely reflected artisan variety. You accept a cup in your palm, feeling the metal's warmth, and think, "If my mood swung with cup choice, I'd need a cupboard full." Apollo invites you to join his Chan, Phoebus, whose golden hand stirs earth's nectar, bless this draught. You echo softly your voice, blending with the breeze, rustling olive leaves above. A fringe notion drifts. Some Orphic chants included secret syllables, whispered only by initiates, said to awaken hidden properties. Historians still debate whether any chant fragments survive beyond poetic references or if their secrecy remained unbreached. You feel the chant's cadence resonate in your chest, grounding your senses. Now comes the final swirl. Apollo tiptoes forward with a lotus petal, pressing it gently into the tea's surface like a perfume seal. The petal floats, serenely releasing floral perfume that drifts skyward. A mainstream fact: lotus petals held the symbolic significance of purity and transformation in Greek mystery cults. Historians still argue whether lotuses were widely cultivated or imported at great expense for temple use. You inhale petals' heady aroma, merged with honey and pomegranate, and quip, "If petals perfume my car, I ditch air fresheners." That's your sixth gentle jest. You take the first ceremonial sip, letting liquid gold rub against your palate, sweet tart, floral and herb-laceda symphony of the Grove Mountain spring and temple. You close your eyes as flavors bloom, recalling each stage: orchard, hush, alpine, honey, sacred water, and now this exquisite blend. A callback emerges, remember, Apollo's first grove discovery. Now that sacred fruit, honey, and water unite in tea, worthy of gods and mortals alike. You slide your cup back to the offering table, heart warmed by taste and ritual. Steam curls around vessels carrying the promise of rest and dreams. Apollo nods proud serene, and you feel ready for the next phase: incantations to awaken the tea's inner power before mortal sips. You stand beside Apollo as he begins the sacred incantation. The cauldron's surface simmering beneath midday sunbeams. He raises his arms, palms open to the sky, and intones in resonant Greek Phoebus radiance, "Unbounded, breathe life into earth's nectar, and grant this brew your golden blessing." Each syllable echoes through olive branches, stirring soft ripples across the tea's amber surface. A mainstream historical fact: ritual chants accompanied Greek libations with priests reciting hymns to gods during pouring. Historians still argue whether these hymns followed fixed poetic meters or varied by local tradition. As his voice fades, you dip a carved laurelwood ladle into the blend and begin to stir in gentle clockwise spirals, the liquid catching light like molten glass. Each rotation coils herbal specks, fruit pulp, and honey into a harmonious swirl. A fringe tidbit whispers some Delphic texts claim stirring direction aligned with the solar course, ensuring divine favor. Historians still debate whether directional stirring impacted flavor or existed solely as a symbolic gesture. You push the ladle steadily, thinking, "If stirring coffee cured my brain fog, I'd own a teaspoon." That's your first gentle jest. The chant resumes, this time softer, a low melody, weaving between words, and you join in, humming the final refrain as you stir. "Light of heaven blend and bind, let sweetness guide hearts and minds." A mainstream fact: communal hymn participation solidified group cohesion in ancient rites. Historians still argue whether pilgrims always joined chants or observed silently under priestly direction. You hum into the breeze, quip, "If humming smoothed my schedule, I'd hum through every meeting." That's your second light jest. With the chant close, Apollo lifts the ladle and drizzles a thin stream back into the cauldron's center, the tea's surface parting in concentric rings. You note how ripples refract light into dancing golds and reds. A fringed suggestion surfaces certain Orphic legends maintained that ripples foretold prophetic omens, wider rings signifying favor, tight circles, warning of disruption. Historians still debate whether any omen readings survive beyond poetic lore. You trace a ripple's path with your gaze and quip, If my deadlines formed ripples this neat, I'd never miss an email. That's your third gentle jest. Finally, Apollo sprinkles a pinch of crushed lotus pollen atop the brewer, finishing touch that causes faint foaming at the edges as pollen oils mingle with honey. A mainstream fact: lotus pollen offered aroma and slight texture enhancement in ceremonial drinks. Historians still argue whether pollen filtered through fabric or remained in suspension for added effect. You inhale the floral lift, letting tea's heady fragrance envelop you, and quip, "If pollen cleared my sinuses this effectively, I'd sneeze with joy." That's your fourth light jest. With incantation complete and stirring, down the tea rests in luminous culmits, surface a tapestry of myths, woven into each drop. You step back, letting the grove's hushed energy cradle you in anticipation of the first divine sip. A callback emerges from orchard's ruby seeds to mountain honey springs' clarity. To this sacred stirring, every step has guided the tea toward its moment of communion. You exhale softly, ready for Apollo's taste test. You trudge down a shaded path into a quiet grove where Artemis awaits her silver bow, slung across her back, and a woven basket of wildflowers in hand, ready to critique Apollo's brew. The dappled sunlight filters through oak leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor as you and Apollo approach. A mainstream historical fact: Artemis, goddess of the hunt and wilderness, was often honored alongside Apollo in paired cults, symbolizing the balance between light and shadow. Historians still argue whether their worship originated as a single twin cult or evolved separately and then merged. Artemis holds a bronze cup rimmed with carved moon motifs its interior, catching the tea's amber glow. She inhales deeply, eyes closed, noting the blend's aroma: pomegranate's tart, fruitiness, honey's warm depth, and a waft of lotus's floral hush. You stand beside her as she sips, her expression thoughtful. A fringe tidbit surfaces: some hunter priestesses believed Artemis's discerning palate could detect hidden herbs or poisons in any brew. Historians still debate whether such tasting trials formed part of her cult's rites or belonged to later mythic expansions. She sets the cup aside on a moss-covered rock, studying Apollo with calm precision. "Your orchard's bounty sings," she says, quietly, voice like wind among leaves. "Yet I sense a missing note, perhaps a wisp of rosemary to echo my woodland domain." A mainstream fact: rosemary appeared in Greek culinary and ritual contexts, symbolizing remembrance and purity. Historians still argue whether rosemary featured regularly in sacred teas or remained confined to funeral rites. You watch Apollo's brow crease as he considers her suggestion. You kneel to gather sprigs of wild rosemary, brushing away ferns to reveal bright green needles. The herb's piney scent bursts forth as you crush a sprig between thumb and forefinger. Artemis nods approvingly, her eyes reflecting the grove's shifting light. A fringe whisper drifts local lore, held that rosemary steeped in pomegranate tea granted hunters uncanny night vision. Historians still debate whether any practical observations supported this claim or if it remained poetic fancy. You place sprigs into a small clay bowl, then quip softly, "If rosemary sharpened my vision this well, I'd never lose my keys." That's your first gentle jest. Apollo lifts his bronze ladle and adds a portion of rosemary-infused oil into the cauldron, swirling it gently so herb and brew entwine. Each stir releases rosemary's resinous warmth, layering atop honey and fruit. A mainstream fact: essential oils and herbal extracts were used in ancient remedies and drinks for both flavor and perceived health benefits. Historians still argue whether Greeks extracted oils deliberately or relied on maceration within fatty bases. You inhale the melding scents thinking if my morning alarm was infused in oil I'd wake with vigor. That's your second light jest. Artemis steps forward dipping a silver pin into the brew and sniffing it thoughtfully. She glides her hand over your shoulder in a familial gesture. Now she says the woodland and orchard stand united. A fringe detail surfaces. Some mythographers claimed that Artemis's approval enchanted the tea, granting drinkers calm focus akin to a hunter's awareness. Historians still debate whether such enchantments featured in original myths or emerged during later Roman interpretations. You taste a small portion. Artemis offers herbal pine, mingling with fruit and honey floral echoes, dancing across your tongue. It feels like a sunlit shade, both vibrant and serene. You quip quietly, if tea sharpened me like this, I'd skip the caffeine. That's your third gentle jest. As Artemis hands you her cup, you note her satisfied smile, the bond between siblings mirroring the blend's harmony. A callback emerges from Grove's dawn hush to Mary's fiery critique. Each stage has enriched the brew with mythic resonance, and as you share this perfected tea, you feel myth's living pulse flow through every sip. You trudge down a shaded path into a quiet grove where Artemis awaits her silver bow, slung across her back and a woven basket of wildflowers in hand, ready to critique Apollo's brew. The dappled sunlight filters through oak leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor as you and Apollo approach. A mainstream historical fact, Artemis, goddess of the hunt and wilderness, was often honored alongside Apollo in paired cults, symbolizing the balance between light and shadow, and temples frequently housed twin shrines to both. Historians still argue whether their worship began as a single cult or evolved separately before merging under Hellenic religious reforms. Artemis stands beside a moss-covered altar, where a shallow bronze bowl cradles the honey pomegranate tea, shimmering like a captured sunset. She inhales deeply, eyes closed, letting the brew's layered scents wash over her pomegranate's tang. Honey's warm floral depth, lotus's heady sweetness, and a faint thyme-woody note. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some Arcadian hunters believed Artemis's favorite bees infused sacred nectars, making her personally responsible for the grove's sweet bounty. Historians still debate whether any lore directly links Artemis to beekeeping or if it arose from conflated nature worship stories. You stand nearby, arms folded respectfully, and quip under your breath, if my critics sniff my coffee this critically, I'd always choose decaf. That's your first gentle jest. She takes a measured sip, eyes drifting toward a nearby laurel tree, where collared doves coo softly. Apollo watches intently, his lyre silent at his side. Artemis sets her cup down on a flat stone and regards the brew with a hunter's precision, noting its color, viscosity, and aroma. Your blend is enchanting, brother. She begins, voice low and melodic, but I sense a missing chord in this chorus of flavors. It needs a sharper hairbone that reminds drinkers of moonlit hunts and forest shadows. A mainstream fact, rosemary featured in Greek culinary and medicinal traditions as a flavoring and preservative often associated with remembrance. Historians still argue whether rosemary was common in everyday cooking or primarily reserved for ritual use. You kneel to gather sprigs of wild rosemary from a nearby bank where the shrub flourishes in sunlit clearings. Each slender needle crackles faintly under your fingertips, releasing pine-like oils that carry a brisk, resinous tang. You crush a sprig between thumb and forefinger, inhaling rosemary's cool aroma, mingled with underlying floral notes, anticipating how it will lift the drink's profile. A fringe whisper drifts. Certain rustic healers insisted that rosemary stew tea granted hunters enhanced night vision, though scholars still debate whether any empirical observations supported this or if it remained fanciful lore. You hold a sprig up to your nose and quip, "If rosemary brightened my ideas this well, I'd sprinkle it on my to-do list." That's your second gentle jest. Returning to the cauldron, Apollo adjusts its position over a low brazier. To warm the brew, slightly coaxing more aroma into the air, he dips a carved wooden ladle into the tea and strains a small portion through a fine linen cloth, removing any stray bits of fruit skin. You place crushed rosemary into a shallow clay dish, where its aroma intensifies in the residual warmth. Artemis steps forward, selecting a pinch of rosemary and letting it drop into the cauldron, its green flecks dancing among ruby and gold. A mainstream fact, Hellenic brewers sometimes infused oils or crushed herbs to create aromatic decoctions. Historians still debate whether these practices emerged primarily from medical treatises or developed independently within religious rites. As the rosemary melts, a piney sharpness weaves through the honeyed sweetness and fruity tang. You dip a slender bronze tasting spoon into the cauldron and offer it to Artemis, who sips thoughtfully while closing her eyes. The forest hush deepens as leaves stir overhead and distant birds pause their song. Artemis exhales softly, eyes opening to reveal a spark of approval. This, she declares, voice bright, now carries the spirit of moonlit hunts and forest shadows. It honors both our domains, yours of light and mine of wild quiet. A fringe detail emerges. Some Delphic priestesses recorded that when Artemis approved a brew, they carved the crescent symbol into the cauldron's rim. Historians still debate whether any archaeological traces of such carvings exist, or if the practice belongs only to later texts. You and Apollo exchange a satisfied smile. You ladle out another spoonful for yourself, savoring rosemary's crispness against the tea's underlying sweetness. The warmth floods your chest, mingling with residual floral and fruity layers. You quip under your breath, "If seasoning my thoughts felt this balanced, I'd host a flavor symposium." That's your third gentle jest. Artemis nods and reaches into her basket, pulling forth a small bundle of lavender buds bound with twine. "Finish," she adds, with a breath of calm. She sprinkles a few buds onto the tea's surface, where they bob gently and release a soft, soothing aroma. A mainstream historical fact, lavender, though more famously used in Roman context, did appear in some Greek garlands and potpourri. Historians still argue whether lavender grew widely in Greece before Roman importation or was introduced later. You inhale lavender's gentle sweetness, its floral hush layering atop rosemary and honey. As the brew settles, you step back to admire the cauldron's surface, now a living mosaic of red, gold, green, and purple flecks. A callback surfaces from the orchard's first fruit to bees. Honey springs pure water and ritual, stirring to Artemis's woodland herbseek element threads into a tapestry of myth and flavor. You scoop a final sip into a polished bronze cup and raise it in a silent toast to the bond of siblings grove and hunt, light and shadow. A fringe notion lingers. Some mythographers wrote that Artemis's blessing would protect drinkers from nightmares, steering dreams toward lucid visions. Historians still debate whether any dream guidance rituals accompanied tea drinking or remained poetic afterthoughts. You sip, letting layered flavors unfold. Pomegranate's bright pop, honey's warm depth, thyme's herbal warmth, lotus's floral echo, and now rosemary's sharp clarity, topped by lavender's calm embrace. A gentle thought drifts. If life's challenges blended this harmoniously, I'd raise a cup to every dawn, And as the grove's breeze carries soft laughter and rustling leaves, you feel the tea's perfected balance wrap around your soul, ready to soothe, inspire, and mindfully ease you toward rest. You trudge into a quiet glade where a shallow stone basin brims with spring water, its surface mottled with drifting petals of white and pink lotus blossoms. The air here hushes, broken only by distant cicada song and the soft drip of water from leaves. Apollo gestures for you to sit on a mossy bank as he lifts a handful of petals from a woven basket lined with laurel leaves. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks valued lotus flowers not only for their beauty, but also for their calming fragrance, using them in perfumery and ritual baths. Historians still argue whether lotus cultivation in Greece preceded contact with Egypt or emerged through Hellenistic trade networks. Artemis, now a silent companion, watches as Apollo places a delicate layer of petals along the basin's edge. Their soft hues, reflected in the water's glassy surface, you kneel beside him, cupping a few petals in your hand and pressing them gently to release their perfume, a whisper of floral sweetness, tinged with fresh morning dew. A fringe tidbit emerges. Some Delphic healers claimed that lotus-infused water could induce visions of past lives. When used in ritual anointments, historians still debate whether any such vision quests were part of early Greek mystery traditions or later mystic reinterpretations. You inhale deeply, letting the lotus aroma cradle your senses and quip, "If my sleep smelled this serene, I'd nap through negotiations." That's your first gentle jest. Apollo selects a shallow bronze ladle and dips it into the basin, gathering water and floating petals alike. He lifts the ladle high, letting petals spill back into the basin in slow, graceful arcs. The blossoms settle into concentric circles, each bloom drifting outward like soft lanterns on still water. A mainstream fact. Ritual infusion of flowers into the water was a common practice for temple offerings and libations, believed to capture divine essence in liquid form. Historians still argue whether these infusions retained botanical efficacy or served principally symbolic roles. You watch petals dance in slow eddies and quip, "If my meetings flowed this elegantly, I'd skip the agendas." That's your second light jest. As petals swirl, Apollo recites a low invocation to nymphs of the fountain, his voice blending with the rustle of leaves overhead. You close your eyes, letting the melodic cadence anchor you in the grove's hush. A fringe notion drifts. Certain poetic fragments suggest that reciting nymphic hymns while steeping petals heightened the infusion's potency. Historians still debate whether any such hymns were ever committed to writing or existed only in oral fragments. The air shimmers as the final syllable falls, and you feel the basin's water hum with something beyond mere moisture. Next, Apollo reaches into his satchel and withdraws a cloth pouch of dried lotus, stamentine flecks of gold dust that glow faintly in his palm. He sprinkles a pinch of stamens into the basin, where they sink amid petals like ancient sunken treasure. A mainstream fact. Lotus stamens were sometimes used in ancient Greek confections and infusions for their aromatic oils. Historians still argue whether stamens were prized more for scent or believed to confer digestive benefits. You scoop a few stamens on your fingertip and taste subtle bitterness beneath floral sweetness and muse. "If flossing tasted this luxurious, I'd do it daily." That's your third gentle jest. The basin's water now glows softly tinted pale rose, and refracting sunlight into prismatic shards on nearby stones. You dip a small clay cup into the infusion, gathering petals and water in one swoop. The cup trembles lightly in your hand, the petals brushing its rim, like silk caressing skin. A fringe anecdote surfaces. Some temple attendants swore that lotus-infused teas, brewed at dawn, captured the day's first light, granting dreamers restful sleep. Historians still debate whether such dawn brew rituals featured in classical calendars or emerged during Roman-era wellness trends. You bring the cup to your lips and sipe a heady swirl of floral sweetness, tempered by water's clarity, and quip, "If hydration felt this poetic, I'd upgrade my water bottle." That's your fourth gentle jest. Artemis steps forward, choosing a floating petal, and wrapping it around a sprig of dried rosemary, tying it together with a thread of laurel bark. She plunges this fragrant bundle into the basin, stirring gently so that rosemary's resin mingles with lotus's floral calm. A mainstream fact, combining multiple botanicals in infusions align with Greek herbalist practices, aiming to balance flavors and therapeutic properties. Historians still argue whether formal herbal compendia guided such blends or folk knowledge reigned primacy. You inhale the new complexity piney rosemary, riding atop floral undulations, and quip, "If my workout routines combined this many perks, I'd sign up for every class." That's your fifth gentle jest. The basin ripples in gentle communion as lotus, rosemary, and thyme meld, creating an aromatic tapestry that shimmers in midday light. Apollo raises his copper ewer and pours a slow stream of pomegranate honey tea, prepared earlier, into the infusion, the amber liquid blending with rose-tinted water and petals swirling in unison. A fringe suggestion drifts. Some oracular notes mention that this triple infusion honey pomegranate lotus symbolized body, soul, and spirit. Historians still debate whether these triads form part of authentic Delphi rituals or were later mystic codifications. You sip a small measure from a bronze cup offered by Apollo, tasting floral top notes, herbal warmth, and fruit honey depth in one harmonious sip. As you drink, the grove's hum deepens, and you feel a gentle weight lift from your shoulders, a hint of dreamlike calm seeping into your bones. A callback shimmers from orchards' ruby seeds, mountain honey, Castalian water incantations stir Artemis's rosemary, to now Lotus's husic step, enriched the brew's alchemy. You exhale softly, thinking, "If relaxation brewed this meticulously, I'd outsource my stress." That's your sixth gentle jest. The sun dips lower as petals drift to stillness, and the infusion's fragrance lingers like a whispered secret. You and Apollo share a quiet smile, bound by ritual and myth. The lotus blossoms waver on the water's surface, guardians of dreams yet to come. You rise, cup empty, but spirit full, ready to carry this lotus-enhanced tea through temple courtyards and mortal hearts alike. One delicious dreamy sip at a time, you trudge onto the marble terrace of the Delphic sanctuary, where 9 muses clad in flowing peplos of pastel wool await in a semicircle, each holding a small alabaster cup of the perfected pomegranate honey lotus rosemary tea. Behind them, sunlit Ionic columns frame Mount Parnassus, its slopes veiled in whispering pines and distant clouds. A mainstream historical fact, the 9 muses personified artistic and scholarly inspiration in Greek myth, each presiding over disciplines from epic poetry to astronomy. Historians still debate whether they originated as local Delphic deities or coalesced later from Pan-Hellenic syncretism. Clio, a muse of history, steps forward and inhales the tea's heady aroma, her brows lifting as if tracing past ages in each scented note. She extends a refined hand and lets a single steam-wrapped swirl drift toward her palm as though tasting memory itself. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Certain Orphic fragments suggest muses once judged mortal offerings of water, wine, or honey to crown the finest libation. With divine favor, historians still argue whether any such judging rituals occurred at Delphi or stem from later poetic imaginings. You stand just behind Apollo, arms folded, anticipating their verdict. Next, Erato, muse of lyric poetry, holds the tea aloft and recites a spontaneous couplet. Honey's sun-kissed verses blend Pomegranate's red refrain to send. Her voice, lyrical and soft, seems to coax petals to float in a delicate dance. You catch the tea's enhanced floral note, lotus's hush, riding atop honey and fruit, and quip under your breath, "If my emails rhymed this well, I'd write ballads instead of reports." That's your first gentle jest. Melpomene, a muse of tragedy, narrows her eyes as she sips, contemplating the pomegranate's bittersweet legacy tied to Persephone's descent. She sets down her cup and mutters, "This brew hints at underworld shade, tantalizing, yet I crave a touch more depth." A mainstream fact, Greek symbols linked pomegranate to life, death, and rebirth through Persephone's myth. Historians still debate whether the fruit's seasonal dormancy inspired funerary rites or if the symbolism arose later through poetic association. You watch Artemis stir that final infusion of rosemary and lavender, thinking, "If my punchlines packed this drama, I'd headline every show." That's your second light jest. Thalia, a muse of comedy, sips with a grin, then quaffs half her cup in a single gulp, startling the others. She bellows, "Now that's an elixir for laughter." Steam swirls around her and you laugh quietly, noting how the tea's sweet tart warmth bursts into a bright cheer on your tongue. A fringe whisper drifts some theatrical guilds, served similar teas before performances to lighten actors' mood. Historians still debate whether any playwrights documented tea's role backstage or if the link rests in later dramatic lore. You quip, "If my jokes landed this sweetly, I'd quit my day job." That's your third gentle jest. Urania, a muse of astronomy, holds her cup, skyward eyes tracing phantom constellations in tea's swirling surface. "I see Cassiopeia's chair," she murmurs, "and Orion's belt of ruby sparks." A mainstream fact, the Delphic sanctuary featured astronomical observations tied to religious calendars. Historians still argue whether temple priests tracked celestial events for festival timing or simply noted them in passing. You follow her gaze, imagining pomegranate seeds as stars, and think, "If my tea guided me home, I'd navigate by taste." That's your fourth light jest. Eratono, wait, that's Euterpe, muse of music. Euterpe steps forward with a small four-minx lyre and strums a chord that echoes the tea's layered harmony. You feel each note resonate like a warm chord in your chest, blending with flavor in an unseen symphony. A fringe note surfaces. Some musical treatises mention pairing melodies with flavors to create synesthetic experiences. Historians still debate whether any ancient Greeks formalized such pairings or if they remain speculative artistry. You close your eyes as sound and taste entwine. Quip, "If my playlists tasted this sweet, I'd chew through speakers." That's your fifth gentle jest. Finally, the remaining muses Calliope, Polyhymnia, Terpsichore, and Thalia offer individual verdicts in turn, praising clarity, balance, and the tea's dreamlike incense. Each muse, representing epic hymns, dance, and comedy, finds a unique delight in the blend, sealing unanimous approval with nods and shared smiles. A mainstream fact, communal tasting and divine blessings reinforce cult unity at Delphi. Historians still argue whether such multi-deity approvals form part of standard temple protocol or emerged as later ceremonial embellishments. Apollo steps forward, gratitude shining as the 9 muses raise their cups in unison, an ethereal toast, echoing through marble corridors. You lift your own cup in solidarity, savoring the tea's final flourish of flavors, pomegranate's tang, honey's warmth, lotus's hush, rosemary's clarity, lavender's calm, and now a crescendo of divine inspiration. A callback emerges from orchard discovery. Through goddess critique to muses' judgment, every phase wove myth into each drop. You sip steam fragrance brushing your nose and think, if praised, tasted this complete, I'd chase every compliment. That's your sixth gentle jest. As the muses drift away in echoing song, leaving petals swirling in sunlight, you feel the tea's power settled into your bones, a mythic blend, poised to soothe mortal dreams. And with that, you trudge onward, cup in hand, awaiting Olympus's final verdict in the halls of Zeus. You trudge back to the grove's sunlit clearing where Apollo retrieves a polished silver cup etched with laurel motifs, the chalice, reserved for a god's first sip. Its surface gleams, reflecting olive branches and marble fragments that litter the earth beneath your feet. You kneel beside him, heart-thudding, as you sense this moment's divine weight. A mainstream historical fact in Greek ritual, the first pour and sip from a libation vessel, whether wine oil or sacred brew, was often dedicated exclusively to the deity before mortals partook. Historians still argue whether cups remained permanently consecrated or were ritually cleansed before human use. Apollo lifts the cup, his golden hair and luminous cloak framing the silver rim, and closes his eyes. The air hushes, broken only by distant cicadas, and the soft clink of honey-laden spoons resting on a nearby marble slab. You watch droplets trembling at the cup's edge, honey and juice swirling like molten sunset. A fringe tidbit surfaces some temple inscriptions claim that Apollo carried his own consecrated chalice, forged by Hephaestus, hidden in his quiver. Historians still debate whether any such divine artifact ever joined myth, or if it emerged as later forgery designed to attract pilgrim donations. With solemn grace, Apollo inclines his head and brings the cup to his lips. He sips, first a gentle sweep that barely kisses his tongue, then a deeper draw, swirling liquid across the palate. His breath catches and a faint smile curves his lips as warmth and sweetness bloom within him. A mainstream fact, tasting tea or wine in ritual settings often involved small sips to fully appreciate flavor nuances as described in classical gastronomic texts. Historians still argue whether these sipping rituals prioritize sensory refinement or strictly adhere to religious protocol. As Apollo tilts the cup back for a second sip, time seems to slow. You catch the tea's steam rising around his face, pomegranate's tart flourish, honey's mellow hum, lotus's soft, floral veil, rosemary's crisp clarity, lavender's calm echo, all converging into a single transcendent note. A fringe whisper drifts, oracular fragments hint that Apollo's first divine sip bestowed poetic insight upon mortals who drank afterward. Some poets claimed that those blessed by this draught penned verses for ages. Historians still debate whether any texts trace inspiration directly to this ritual, or if the link remains poetic fancy. You hold your breath as he sets the cup down, eyes aglow. He turns toward you, his gaze bright as dawn, and speaks in a voice both thunderous and gentle. Behold, nectar reborn, a song of earth and sky in each drop. You tremble at the pronouncement, feeling tea's warmth ripple through your chest as though it fills every breath. A mainstream fact, declarations of divine approval immediately following libations were integral to Greek cult practice, often recorded in dedicatory inscriptions. Historians still argue whether oracular sites published official verdicts or simply conveyed them orally. You quip softly, if approval felt this sweet, I'd seek endorsements everywhere. That's your first gentle jest. Apollo lifts your hand, placing the chalice in your palm with surprising delicacy. Now he invites, taste the fruit of our labors, and drink in harmony. The cup feels cool and weighty, a vessel of myth and mastery. You raise it slowly, recalling every step. Demeter's groves hush, Hymettus' honey harvest, Castalian waters clarity, thunderous incantations, Artemis's herbal refinement, Muse's luminous verdict. A callback shimmers each phase, threaded into this moment when mortal lips meet divine brew. You sip tentatively, letting liquid cradle your tongue. Pomegranate's vibrant burst lets a bright arrow of fruit, darting across your palate before honey's gentle tide sweeps in, smoothing edges with balm. Lotus's floral hush drapes over the sweetness, while rosemary's crisp note pricks the edges and lavender's quiet lull rounds every corner into serene completion. You close your eyes, breathing slowly, letting each layer reveal itself in an unhurried unfolding. A fringe notion surfaces. Certain poetic commentaries suggested that after this taste, mortals felt a weightless grace, as if the burdens of flesh eased. Historians still debate whether any medical treatises noted physiological effects, or whether the notion thrived in the literary imagination. You set the cup aside, savoring tea's afterglow, like a whispered secret against your lips. A mainstream fact: after the first sip, mortal participants often received a separate chalice to share among themselves, symbolizing communion with the divine. Historians still argue whether shared cups remained in temple custody or passed to pilgrims as blessed souvenirs. You glance at a row of waiting cups, bronze, clay, and silver each, gleaming with tea's promise, ready for human hands. A gentle hush settles as priests approach, offering individual cups. You accept one, its rim cooled by marble shade as you raise it to your lips. With your second sip, you feel tea's warmth blossom through your veins, an ember of calm illumination kindling in your core. A soft chuckle escapes. If enlightenment tasted this smooth, I'd ask for a refill. That's your second gentle jest. Around you, pilgrims murmur, each tasting with reverent quiet. Someone across the terrace exhales a contented sigh that ripples through the crowd like wind across water. A mainstream fact: communal tasting after divine approval fostered unity among worshippers, reinforcing social bonds. Historians still debate whether such gatherings blurred social hierarchy or reaffirmed elite roles through seating order and vessel quality. You note a trembling elder's hands as she holds her cup, and you feel shared warmth weaving through the assembly. You catch Apollo's eye across the terrace, his expression serene, proud. He offers a nod, and you return it with gratitude, sharing a moment that spans mortal and divine. The grove's breeze stirs olive leaves, carrying tea's layered aromas away on wandering currents. A callback glimmers every ingredient: apple red seeds, thyme, sweet honey, pure spring water, lotus petals, rosemary, and lavender converged into this moment of first divine tasting of ritual, crystallizing myth in flavor. You finish your sip and set the cup gently among others, heart and mind alight with quiet wonder. The gods' first verdict has rippled into mortal souls, binding them to myth's living pulse. You breathe deeply, tea's essence lingering on your tongue, and think, if beginnings always tasted this divine, I'd savor every first. With that, you prepare to share this legendary brew with the world below Delphi's heights. You trudge along a winding marble walkway toward the summit of Mount Olympus, where Zeus's throne room awaits to judge Apollo's honey-scented pomegranate tea. The path is lined with laurel garlands that flutter in the divine breeze, their leaves shimmering like emerald flames. A mainstream historical fact: Olympian gatherings in myth often convened high upon sacred peaks, symbolizing the gods' removal from mortal realms. Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks literally imagined Olympus as an earthly mountain or conceived it purely as a celestial domain. Ahead, massive bronze doors carved with lightning motifs swing open, revealing a vast hall of ivory pillars and floating torches. The throne seat of the sky god gleams at the far end, its steps flanked by griffin sculptures and swirling clouds painted on marble walls. You trudge forward, heart-pounding, as Zeus, mantled in storm-dark robes, rises from his throne. A fringed tidbit surfaces some Hesiodic fragments claim the throne's cloud mural was said to shift subtly with each god's mood. Historians still debate whether any mythic descriptions intended living frescoes or simply poetic flourish. Apollo kneels before Zeus, presenting the silver chalice that once bore his first divine sip. Zeus's gaze, like thunder condensed into human form, softens as he lifts the chalice, inhaling the tea's layered fragrance. You watch droplets of steam rise around his stern features, mingling pomegranate tang, honey warmth, and herbal echoes. A mainstream fact offerings to Zeus often included first fruits and rare delicacy estia, though mythic here parallels grain-based libations in historical rituals. Historians still argue whether wine or grain mashes held primacy in early Olympian cult. Zeus swirls the tea in the chalice, watching how light fractures into gold and ruby. He brings the chalice to his lips for a deliberate sip, eyes closed as flavors unfold. A hush of divinity washes over the hall. Even the floating torches dim in reverent pause. A fringe observation drifts. Some Orphic texts whisper that Zeus once blessed his cup to grant visionary dreams. When held to the brow, historians still debate whether any dream oracle traditions link tea to visionary rites or if they applied only to wine libations. After a moment's silence, Zeus speaks in a voice like distant thunder. This brew unites earth's richness and skies lightworthy of Olympus's heart. He sets the chalice aside and motions to Poseidon, Hera, and Athena gathered on adjacent thrones. One by one, they taste from the shared cup, each finding delight in the tea's depth. Poseidon's sea-tinged grin at the pomegranate's brine-like echo. Hera's appreciative nod at honey's regal warmth. Athena's thoughtful sip, recognizing lotus's clarity. A mainstream fact, communal tasting among deities symbolizes the unity of divine powers. Historians still debate whether such mythic councils mirrored historical synods of priesthoods. You stand just behind Apollo, feeling the tea's approval ripple through the divine assembly. Aphrodite drapes her arm around Dionysus as she savors lavender's sweet lull, and Hephaestus murmurs in wonder at rosemary's sharp sting. A fringe tale surfaces. Some later poets wrote that Hephaestus crafted secret votive chalices for the tea, enhancing its metal resonance. Historians still debate whether any such objects appear in archaeological records or exist only in literary rumor. At last, Zeus raises the chalice high. Let this tea flow among mortals, a gift from gods to soothe minds and inspire dreams. Thunder rumbles softly in applause, scattering sparks across the ceiling frescoes. You exhale chest, warmed by the communal verdict, and quip, if board meetings ended with thunderous praise, I'd brew more tea. That's your first gentle jest. With divine decree sealed, Apollo bows, laurel wreath quivering. He returns the chalice to a pedestal, where it glows under Olympian lights, an eternal symbol of tea's divine sanction. You step forward to catch a whispered glance from Zeus, whose thunderous voice softens. Go now share this gift in the mortal world. You trudge back down marble steps, cup passed among gods, now empty but spirit full. A callback shimmers from groves quiet to Muse's lyric judgment to Olympus's thunderous approval. Ache realm sealed tea's mythic path. You descend toward mortal plains, ready to weave the divine brew into human hearts, one soothing sip at a time. You trudge down Mount Olympus's sacred slope, descending into valleys dotted with olive groves and marble ruins following pilgrim trails toward Delphi's temple once more, this time laden with divine decree. Mortals pause in clusters, farmers, scholars, and weary travelers, clutching urns and baskets, each anticipating Apollo's fabled honey pomegranate tea, now blessed by all 12 Olympians. A mainstream historical fact temple precincts across Greece served as hubs of exchange, where oracular pronouncements, votive offerings, and sacred foods melded ritual with commerce. Historians still debate whether pilgrims conflated distinct sanctuary rules or adhered to separate cult codes. You reach Delphi's lower terrace, where booths brim with empty jugs and clay cups awaiting the blessed brew. Novice priests line up in saffron robes, ready to ladle freshly heated portions into waiting vessels. You kneel to help unpack a silver urn from Apollo's entourage, a vessel etched with laurel and lyre, its surface echoing Olympus's glow, before setting it on a low marble stand. A fringe tidbit surfaces certain ancient inscriptions hint that some pilgrims paid special tribute for cups filled with the Olympian urn, believing them to hold more potent blessings. Historians still debate whether multiple urns circulated or if mythic singularity reigned. The head priest lifts a small bowl, pouring tea from the urn into a polished bronze ladle. You catch a whiff of steam honey's golden depth entwined with pomegranate tang, lotus's hush herbal warmth, floral calm, and now a final note of divine unity. Each ladle fills a pilgrim's cup, hands exchanging in silent reverence. A mainstream, fact communal distribution of sacred liquids fostered unity among worshippers, a practice referenced in Platonic dialogues. Historians still argue whether ritual sharing eroded social boundaries or reinforced hierarchies through seating placements. You guide filled cups toward pilgrims, an elderly shepherd, a poet's apprentice, a traveler from distant Cyrenaial, sipping with eyes closed, absorbing nectar's promise. A fringe inside drifts local lullabies once accompanied tea distribution to lull restless pilgrims. Historians still debate whether these lullabies existed in antiquity or emerged as later monastic traditions. You quip under your breath if lullabies paired with tea brewed sleep. This well I'd sing through deadlines. That's your first gentle jest. Beyond the distribution circle, musicians descended from Muses' ranks play, soft guitarra, and Aulos melodies weaving sound that echoes Olympus and grove alike. Pilgrims sway cups raised as both toast and prayer, a symphony of flavor and melody weaving through marble corridors. A mainstream fact musical offerings often accompanied libations in temple feasts, reinforcing mythic narratives. Historians still debate whether musicians held priestly status or served as hired performers. You hum along tea's warmth, humming in your chest too, and quip, if sound panned flavors this seamlessly, I'd pair choirs with coffee. That's your second light jest. As cups empty, some pilgrims refill 2-3 times, drawing deeper solace from each sip. You step back, letting them partake, while you carry fresh urns from Apollo's retinue. The dance of ladles and cups continues until every vessel glints empty. A callback emerges, divine blessing by Zeus, and kin now flows in mortal veins. Thea's mythic circle complete. You gather leftover empty cups into baskets for ritually breaking or offering as custom demands, shards, to litter the temple floor like fallen petals. A mainstream fact, the deliberate breaking of dedicated vessels symbolized impermanence and devotion. Historians still argue whether cups remained as votive fragments or were recycled as temple relics. You crack a cup's rim with a gentle tap, its echo soft on marble, and think, if shards held value, this sacred I'd never throw away dishes. That's your third gentle jest. With the sun lowering, you trudge across temple grounds, now quieting lanterns set ablaze along marble pathways. The scent of tea lingers, a promise to rest and dream. You glimpse a final group of pilgrims, settling for the night cups beside their pillows, ready for dreams steeped in the divine brew. You offer one last bow to Delphi's omphalos stone, where soil and myth meet, then turn toward Ionia's plains, knowing Apollo's honey pomegranate tea will carry peace and inspiration far beyond this sanctuary's heights. You trudge from Delphi's twilight hush toward the healing grove of Epidaurus, where physicians cluster beneath plane trees, brandishing cups of Apollo's honey pomegranate tea as medicine for restless souls. A mainstream historical fact, Epidaurus' sanctuary of Asclepius served as a healing spa, where patients underwent incubation rituals, seeking cures in dreams. Historians still argue whether tea or sleep rituals held primary curative power. Priests in white robes stand at a low altar, ladling warm tea into shallow clay bowls, and calling patients forward for sip and dream charms. You kneel to help fill bowls, noting how steam rises like spectral tendrils, each curl carrying hope. A fringe detail emerges. Some medical papyri mention tea blends for insomnia using pomegranate juice and honey. Though historians still debate whether these recipes predate Roman influence or echo Delphi's rituals, you pass a bowl to a pale patient whose grateful smile warms you more than tea's steam and quip, "If cures tasted this sweet, I'd volunteer as a patient." That's your first gentle jest. Nearby, a rhythm of gongs and soft incantations fills the air as patients sip and settle on mats beneath whispering leaves. Priests recite prayers to Asclepius, blending medical lore with divine pleas. You step aside to observe the ritual labeling of cupsick, marked with the patient's name and ailment, ensuring targeted blessings. A mainstream fact personalizing healing libations reflected Greek emphasis on individual health profiles. Historians still argue whether such labels appear in archaeological finds or only in textual descriptions. You approach the physician's tent, where a doctor in flowing hymation examines an amphora of tea, tapping its side and nodding. He pours a small sample into your hand, inviting you to taste its warmth and judge its fit for a patient. You taste soothing floral notes, and gentle tartness settle in your chest. You nod, suggesting additional lotus infusion for deeper resta refinement praised by Artemis. The doctor grins, scribbling notes on a papyrus scroll, and quips, "If my feedback fixed insomnia this well, I'd moonlight as a somnologist." That's your second light jest. Beyond the grove, festival goers raise cups in twilight to toast morning's victory games, mixing healing with celebration. You watch as tea bridges medicine and merriment its dual nature, uniting body and soul. A callback surfaces from divine brew's first sip on Olympus to mortal healing mats. Each cup carries mythic promise into practical care. You raise your cup in silent salute, thinking, "If tea cured mortal woes, I'd prescribe it weekly." That's your third gentle jest. As lantern glow dances on olive trunks, you trudge onward toward festival grounds, tea's warmth guiding you through night's hush. You trudge from Delphi's twilight hush along a winding path toward the healing grove of Epidaurus, where the sanctuary's white-columned portico gleams in the lantern light, inviting weary souls to partake in divine remedies. The air carries a soft murmuring, the echo of distant gongs, and whispered prayers, weaving through plane trees heavy with summer leaves. As you step beneath vine-wrapped trellises, you sense Epidaurus's dual promise of medical care and sacred wonder. A mainstream historical fact, the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus functioned as a renowned healing center in ancient Greece, where patients sought cures through incubations, leaping in sacred enclosures to receive divine visions. Historians still argue whether dream incubation or medicinal rituals held primary significance in patient recovery. Ahead, priests in pristine, white hymnations stand behind low marble altars, each laden with shallow clay bowls, filled with steaming honey pomegranate tea, perfumed by lotus and herbs. You join them in ladling warm tea into each bowl, its surface shimmering like captured dawn. The scent pomegranate's bright tang, mingled with honey's golden warmth wafts into the grove, softening worried brows. A fringe tidbit surfaces some medical papyri, attributed calming properties to the tea's combination of pomegranate and lotus, claiming it soothed troubled spirits better than wine or unguents. Historians still debate whether such recipes appear in genuine Hippocratic texts or belong to later folk medicine compilations. You pass a bowl to a frail patient, clutching a linen satchel, her eyes reflecting both hope and exhaustion. When she tastes the tea's gentle embrace, a tremor of relief softens her lips, and you think, if relief tasted this sweet, I'd prescribe comfort daily. That's your first gentle jest. Nearby, a physician in a flowing saffron tunic consults a papyrus roll while noting tea batch numbers. He murmurs dosage instructions: 2 small cups at dusk, 1 upon waking, each steeped precisely 30 breaths after brewing to preserve herbal efficacy. A mainstream fact. Greek physicians often tailored remedies to individual patients, recording case notes on scrolls, and adjusting herbal formulations accordingly. Historians still argue whether these detailed case histories were widespread or limited to elite temple physicians. You lean in, tasting a spoonful yourself, its warmth gliding over your tongue, floral top notes yielding to gentle herbaceous depth. And you quip, if personalization birthed such comfort, I'd tailor my to-do list like a prescription. That's your second light jest. Beyond the Healing Alcove Festival, lanterns glow along cobbled avenues where farmers, musicians, and families gather to celebrate the Pythian Games' closing festivities. Crowds clutch cups of the same honey pomegranate lotus tea, raising them in communal toasts under flickering torches. A mainstream fact, sacred teas and libations were often shared at Greek festivals, alongside wine, fostering unity and marking ritual transitions. Historians still debate whether tea offerings gradually supplanted certain wine libations or simply supplemented them in specific sanctuaries. You weave through the crowd offering refills from a bronze ewer etched with laurel wreaths, noting how even boisterous laughter softens as tea's warmth spreads through palms and chests. At a low wooden table, you observe physicians prescribing the tea as a sleep aid for insomniac dancers and anxious spectators. One doctor combines tea with crushed mint and meadowsweet stirring to release additional calming essences. A fringe notion drifts. Some festival-goers swore that tea blended with a whisper of opium poppy petals induced prophetic dreams. Historians still debate whether any opiate use in sacramental teas occurred, or if such claims stem from later Roman-era liberalizations. You taste the mint meadow blend yourself, it's cool. Herbaceous lift, smoothing pomegranate's tongue and murmur, If Min revived me this gently, I'd steep my morning coffee in herbs. That's your third gentle jest. Across the plaza, a troupe of dancers sways in ritual rhythm, moving to kitara melodies. At each pause, they lift teacups in salute to Asclepius, flicking petals into the air like confetti. A mainstream fact intertwined music movement and libation formed core elements of healing rituals at Epidaurus. Historians still argue whether dance served therapeutic purposes or functioned mainly as a celebratory spectacle. You join the dancers for a moment, swirling your cup to scatter petals, feeling tea's warmth harmonize with each gentle step. Circling the healing wells, you meet families, handing cups to children with mild fevers or anxious coughs. You offer a small cup to a rosy-cheeked child clutching his mother's hand. He sips with wide-eyed delight, finding sweetness where ointments once frightened him. A fringe detail surfaces village tales. Describe the child's draft variation tea mixed with lavender and honey to ward off nightmares in young sleepers. Historians still debate whether any pediatric formulations appear in classical medical texts or if they originated as later folklore. You smile as the child's sigh of comfort blooms, and you quip, if childhood fears dissolved like this, I'd bottle bedtime stories. That's your fourth gentle jest. As dusk deepens, priests ring small bronze bells to signal final tea rounds before therapeutic incubation begins. You step aside as mats are unrolled beneath plane trees, pillows laid for dream incubation, egg patient sipping final cups before resting. A mainstream fact incubation, the practice of sleeping in sacrosanct spaces to receive healing dreams, depended on preliminary purifications and libations like this tea. Historians still argue whether dream content guided medical treatments or served mainly devotional ends. You help arrange pillows and blankets, watching steam curl from abandoned cups, each one a promise of restful visions. Beyond the healing beds, you glimpse a small group of festival bonfires, where revelers toast teacups alongside grape wine, comparing soothing effects. A callback emerges, the same tea blessed on Olympus now flows through mortal veins, bridging God's favor and human recovery. You draw a final breath of the grove's mingled scent, shunny pomegranate lotus herbs, and lingering firelight letting warmth settle in your chest. You quip softly, if life's cures blended this seamlessly, I'd never fear tomorrow. And with that closing beat, you trudge onward toward the night's restful promise, carrying Epidaurus's healing brew in every hopeful step. You trudge into Delphi's sacred precinct at dawn's pink edge, where the Pythian Games opening ceremonies unfold beneath Ionic porticos, draped in laurel wreaths. Priests in saffron robes lead a solemn procession of athletes, musicians, and pilgrims toward the grand altar at the sanctuary's heart, each carrying bowls of Apollo's honey-scented pomegranate tea as libations to consecrate the festival. A mainstream historical fact, the Pythian Games held every 4 years at Delphi in Apollo's honor featured athletic and musical contests with ritual offerings central to their opening rites. Historians still argue whether tea offerings preceded or followed the inaugural javelin and hymn competitions. You join the line of priestly bearers, each holding a shallow bronze bowl filled with steaming tea. The air shimmers with incense smoke, mingling with tea's layered aroma, pomegranate's bright tang, honey's warm depth, lotus's floral hush, and herbal undertones of rosemary and lavender. Ahead, a row of marble steps ascends to the main altar where carved reliefs depict Apollo's chariot laurel groves and singing muses. You climb each step carefully, echoing the footsteps of countless past devotees. A fringe Tidbit surfaces some late antique sources claim that spilled tea on certain steps left faint red stains. Still revered by pilgrims, historians still debate whether any such stains existed or represent metaphorical echoes in poetic texts. At the altar's base, a circle of priestesses stands ready to receive libations. The chief priest, his laurel crown bright in early light, raises his ladle and intones, "To Phoebus, Apollo, giver of song and strength, accept our humble offering as we commence your games." His voice echoes through marble colonnades, each syllable stirring ripples across the tea's coppery surface. You step forward in turn, lifting your bowl and pouring tea in a steady arc into a stone basin carved with lyre motifs. A mainstream fact, directional libations, pouring offerings toward east, southwest, and north symbolize cosmic harmony and honor deities' dominion over all realms. Historians still argue whether these directions derive from earlier Eastern rituals or evolve within Hellenic practice. You quip softly, "If pouring rituals improve my aim, I'd skip archery practice." That's your first gentle jest. As each priest and pilgrim offers tea, the basin fills with layered hues, reflecting the dawn's brilliance and the assembly's unity. Musicians, flutists, and kithara players strike up a hymn, their melody weaving through columns and melding with the basin's gentle clinks. A fringe notion drifts certain Orphic liturgies, paired specific musical modes with each libation pour, believing sound enhance the offering's potency. Historians still debate whether any musical mode manuals guided these pairings, or if they derive from later theoretical reconstructions. You inhale the convergence of melody and aroma, thinking, "If music enhanced taste this well, I'd choreograph my coffee breaks." That's your second light jest. After the basin overflows, the chief priest dips a bronze ladle into overflowing tea and offers a libation to the skywine, dark fluid splashing onto flagstones, steam rising like sacred prayers. He bows, and all bearers echo in a unified nod before turning to face the assembled athletes and spectators. A mainstream fact, spilling wine or other libations onto temple courtyards signify divine acceptance. Historians still argue whether the liquid was later collected for drinking or left as an irrevocable offering. You watch amber droplets glisten and quip, "If sacrifices tasted this sweet, I'd lose my winter stash." That's your third gentle jest. Next, the priestesses distribute individual cups of tea to athletes awaiting their trials. Sprinters, wrestlers, and javelin throwers each nodding gratefully before sipping. The tea's warmth steadies their breath, lending calm resolve. A mainstream fact, pre-competition rituals often combine physical warm-ups with sacred libations to honor the gods and focus the mind. Historians still debate whether physical and spiritual preparations held equal weight or prioritized one over the other. You stand to the side observing a discus thrower close his eyes as he drinks quip, "If tea sharpened my focus, I'd sip before meetings." That's your fourth gentle jest. As cups empty, priestesses collect them in woven baskets, humming soft refrains. You help stack bowls with care, knowing each vessel carried divine favor. A fringed detail surfaces certain temple inventories, recorded thousands of libation cups destroyed after ceremonies to prevent secular reuse. Historians still debate whether any ancient craftsman specialized in ritual-only vessels or if destruction remained ad hoc. You place the final bowl into the basket and quip, "If dishes broke this beautifully, I'd host more parties." That's your fifth gentle jest. With libations complete, trumpets ring across the sanctuary, signaling the game's official start. Athletes shoulder their gear. Musicians tune instruments. Spectators rise, anticipation blossoming like sunrise. A callback emerges from Grove's hidden orchard to Muse's terrace. To Zeus's throne, each realm's blessing now pours into mortal festivity. You trudge down marble steps, teas, lingering warmth guiding you towards stadium arches ready to witness contests where courage and melody will honor Apollo anew. You trudge through the narrow cobblestone streets of modern Athens at dusk, the air redolent with jasmine and car exhaust as you follow hand-painted signs, pointing toward a new sanctuary of sleep, Phoebus's tea room. Neon laurel wreaths glow above a low doorway, inviting you into a haven of hushed light and amber steam. A mainstream historical fact in recent decades, Greece has seen a craft beverage renaissance that revives ancient recipes med herbal infusions and now tea blends inspired by classical lore. Historians still argue whether these modern interpretations adhere faithfully to original ingredients or reflect contemporary tastes. Inside walls display framed reproductions of vase paintings depicting pomegranate groves and honey harvests, alongside botanical sketches of lotus and rosemary. You step up to a marble counter where a barista in a linen tunic offers a menu. Scrawled in chalk, Apollo's Dream Tea Pomegranate Hymettus, Honey Castalian Water Lotus, Rosemary Lavender. You order a cup, and she begins crafting your infusion with reverent precision, measuring each ingredient by weight and volume. A fringe tidbit surfaces: some specialty tea houses claim they cultivate heirloom pomegranate varietals purportedly descended from ancient Delphic orchards, though scholars still debate whether any genetic lineage survives or if the claim hinges on romantic marketing. You watch as she pours spring water from an imported cast iron kettle, filtered and chilled. To 20 seconds to cover a blend of dried pomegranate arils and honey-infused petals. The kettle's spout arcs in a steady line, steam rising in perfume wisps that swirl like ancient mists. A mainstream fact: modern tea artisans often emphasize precise water temperature, and steeping times typically 3 to 5 minutes for herbal blends to optimize flavor extraction. Historians still debate whether any such precision existed in antiquity or if ancient brewers relied on intuition. Next, the barista adds crystal shards of local thyme honey, harvested from hives on nearby slopes of Hymettus. Then layers in lotus and lavender petals for floral hush. You inhale deeply the warm, complex aroma dancing in the air. She stirs clockwise with a polished olive wood spoon, and you quip under your breath, "If stirring this soothed my inbox, I'd drown in notifications." That's your first gentle jest. The tea rests under a clear glass dome, set atop the brew, infusing for precisely 4 minutes. As you wait, you peruse hand-bound notebooks on a nearby shelf, each filled with modern brew journals where patrons jot flavor notes and dream intentions. A fringe observation emerges. Some journals include entries claiming spontaneous lucid dreams after sipping Apollo's blend, sparking debate among tea enthusiasts about placebo versus genuine herbal effects. Historians still debate whether any classical Greeks recorded dream outcomes, or if dream lore sprung from romantic revivalists. Your tea is served in a shallow ceramic bowl, decorated with olive leaf motifs. You lift it to your lips, noting the weight and warmth against your palms. The first sip envelops you: pomegranate's bright tang, honey's mellow depth, lotus's dreamy hush, rosemary's clear lift, and lavender's gentle lull, interwoven with a modern minerality from filtered water. You close your eyes, savoring how ancient elements come alive in this urban setting, and quip, "If city life brewed peace like this, I'd never leave the cafe." That's your second light jest. Around you, other patrons lean into their bowls, voices hushed in contented sighs. A barista conducts a small tea meditation, guiding everyone to breathe in aroma, stir once, and then sip in unisona, modern ritual echoing ancient incantations. A mainstream fact, many contemporary tea houses host guided tastings and meditations to enhance mindfulness. Historians still argue whether such formal ceremonies resemble ancient Greek communal rituals or represent modern wellness trends. You wander to a small retail nook where jars of bespoke tea blends line wooden shelves. Each label lists ingredients and mythic benefits: clarity of Apollo, Dreamweaver's lotus, and Artemis's night vision. You inspect a jar of clarity sealed with beeswax and stamped with a lyre emblem. A fringe note drifts some artisans market limited first harvest pomegranate seeds gathered at dawn, claiming superior vibrancy. Historians still debate whether any archaeological or botanical records validate dawn harvest superiority or if it's purely evocative storytelling. You tuck a jar under your arm and quip, "If my pantry held mythology, I'd cook epics nightly." That's your third gentle jest. Before leaving, you take one last sip in the softly lit lounge area, where lounge chairs mimic ancient klezmos forms. The amber liquid glides down your throat, carrying ancient echoes into modern calm. A callback emerges from divine orchard and mountain hives to sacred spring and mythic rituals, now reborn in this city refuge, each element distilled into a bowl that bridges past and present. You step back into Athens' evening glow, tea's warmth settling in your chest like a whispered promise. You quip softly, "If history felt this cozy, I'd never use my GPS." And as you wander home, every footstep carries the gentle cadence of ancient myth, modern revival, and one soothing sip at a time. You trudge at dawn's gentle break through olive groves that still whisper of myth, carrying the last bowls of Apollo's honey-scented pomegranate tea to a quiet mountaintop overlook. The edge of the sky blushes rose and gold, mirroring the tea's hue in your cup. A mainstream historical fact, sunrise rituals in Greek tradition often involved libations of wine or sweet drinks to welcome the day's light. Historians still argue whether these morning offerings preceded or followed midday ceremonies. Ahead, a small circle of pilgrims gathers. Farmers, poets, and travelers clutching a cup. They have journeyed from far-flung valleys to taste the tea, now sanctified by a goddess critique, Muse's judgment, and Olympian decree. You join them stepping onto a smooth stone slab that overlooks a valley draped in early mist. A fringe tidbit surfaces: some Hellenistic travelers claimed that drinking this tea at dawn granted visions of future dawns, though scholars still debate whether any classical diaries record such visionary morning sips, or if the tale blossomed in later revivalist accounts. Apollo stands beside you, golden robes, catching the first light. He raises his cup and intones softly, "To beginnings, carried on myth's wings, and to the souls who seek light within every sunrise." You echo the sentiment, lifting your bowl in a humble salute. A hush of reverence settles, broken only by birdsong and distant olive leaves rustling. You sip, pomegranate's bright tang greets the palate. Honey's warm tide follows, and the faintest floral echolotus and lavender lingers as a soft exhale. Taro-like layers of rosemary and thyme snap into clarity, while the water's pure essence from Castalian spring rounds every edge. Each flavor note evokes a chapter of this tea's journey: cliffside hives, sacred springs, goddess blends, temple libations, modern cafes, all distilled into this solstice moment. A mainstream fact, blending multiple botanical elements into ritual drinks, symbolized life's interwoven complexity in Greek thought. Historians still argue whether recipes aimed more for symbolic resonance or flavor harmony. Pilgrims close their eyes, letting tea's warmth seep into their bones like embers cradle flame. You watch as a shepherd tips his cup up to the sun, letting droplets diffuse across his brow. An elderly poet straightens voice hushed. This drink sings of myth, yet soothes the marrow of weary men. A fringe observation drifts, some rumor that the poet's final ode, composed after this sip, remains hidden in Delphi's archives. Historians still debate whether any undiscovered verses await rediscovery, or if the legend reflects eternal longing. You gaze across the valley where olive trees form endless patterns, their silver-green leaves glittering in dawn's glow. A callback emerges each step, from pomegranate groves, hidden by Demeter's gift, to this summit, wove mortal hearts and divine light into a seamless tapestry. You lift your cup in silent thanks, feeling tea's layered spirits stir both memory and hope. As the community disperses to greet the new day's labors, you linger cradling the last sip. A gentle thought drifts: if a single cup could preserve myth's magic and soothe mortal minds, what wonders might dwell in every dawn? You tip the bowl empty now, yet echoing with promise, and set it on the sun-warmed stone, where it will dry in golden rays. Above you Apollo raises his lyre, in a soft farewell coda, melody of sunrise and ritual, ending this epic blend's tale. You bow your head heart-light and full ready to carry this legend wherever your steps may lead. Let the dawn's gentle light cradle your thoughts, soft as petals floating on still water. Feel the early breeze brush across your skin, carrying whispers of olive groves and ancient lore. Inhale slowly, drawing in the scent of honeyed pomegranate lotus's floral hush, and the clean clarity of spring water. Then exhale every trace of tension into the waking world. Recall the orchard's ruby fruit, each seed bursting with mythic promise. Remember bees' golden harvest on time's scented hills, and the sacred water's glacier cool purity. Envision pomegranate juice, weaving with honey's warmth in a bronze cauldron, stirred by incantations and refined by Artemis's woodland herbs, judged by muses beneath Ionian skies. Carry each memory like an ember glowing softly in your chest. Now let flavors dissolve into a whisper: rosemary's clear lift, lavender's calm lull, lotus's dreamlike veil. Let these layered notes fade into a gentle hush, guiding breath to a steady rhythm, steady as waves lapping against temple steps. Imagine the scrolls of Delphi's oracle fluttering closed, the muse's song fading into morning's hush, and the god's verdict settling into peaceful silence. Feel your eyelids grow heavy as soft as lotus petals at dusk. Let the story's final chord resonate in marrow and mind, a lullaby woven from myth and leaf. If any doubt lingers, say it once more. From memory's cup sweet, warm, and comforting, then release it into dawn's calm embrace. Sleep now cradled by honeyed sunset and pomegranate's promise. Rest easy in the knowledge that myth and memory intertwine within you, carrying you gently toward dreams, where ancient orchards and sunlit summits await once more.